Okay, now for the next couple examples, I want to start with a blank kit. So I moved on to a blank kit and I have a blank pattern in front of me. And I want to talk about the subpages of Oscillator 1 and Oscillator 2. Now I'm on Oscillator 1 right now. If I press Oscillator 1 again, this brings me to the subpage. We see the LED is green, and instead of saying Oscillator 1, it says noise. Now we don't hear any difference because the volume of the noise generator is all the way down. So let's go back to Oscillator 1. I'm going to turn the volume of the first oscillator all the way down. And then I will go to the noise generator and turn this up. All right. So here, you can adjust the noise sample and hold parameter. And we can also adjust the color here. And we have a fade parameter where we can fade the volume envelope, either fading it out like this, or fading it in. The noise generator can be extremely useful for making percussive sounds and making drums. For example, if I just fade this out like this, make it a little bit brighter, this could be great for a closed hi-hat type sound. Now, my main concern is not with the noise generator right now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this down, and I'll turn Oscillator 1 back up. If I go to Oscillator 2 and I tap this again, the LED turns green, and I'm on the second page, which brings me to an area where I can do amplitude modulation, and I can also sync the oscillators. I have vibrato, and I can also bend the pitch of my notes. Now, quickly, let's talk about amplitude modulation. That's what the AM stands for. What this allows us to do is to use one oscillator to modulate the volume, the amplitude of another oscillator. The volume of one oscillator will be affected by the frequency of the second oscillator. Now, when we're talking about frequency, frequency is related to pitch. The lower the pitch, the lower the frequency. What I'm going to do is make it so that the volume of oscillator 1 is modulated by the frequency of oscillator 2. So AM1, if I turn that on, it will allow me to do just that. Now, if I play a note, we don't hear anything happening yet. Oscillator 2 is all the way down. If I adjust the tuning of this, I've adjusted this so low that we can now hear the volume of oscillator 1 being modulated by oscillator 2. Now, the waveform that we use for the amplitude modulation also has an effect. So I'm going to change this from the sawtooth to something different. Let's just go for the pulse. And the pulse width will also affect the way the amplitude modulation is applied. This means that I could use pulse width modulation here to add some variation to the amplitude modulation happening on oscillator 1. So now if I increase the tuning of oscillator 2, the amplitude modulation increases. And it does so until we get to a point where it doesn't really sound like we're modulating the amplitude, but simply changing the timbre of our sound. So this can bring us to some very unique sound creation possibilities. We go back here, pressing oscillator 2 again, brings me back to that same page. So that's with AM1 on. With AM1 on, oscillator 1, its amplitude is modulated by the frequency of oscillator 2. I could also make it so that the frequency of oscillator 1 modulates the amplitude of oscillator 2. That's what happens if I turn on AM2. So it basically works the same way, except now, oscillator 1, its whole purpose is just to modulate the amplitude of the second oscillator. I'm going to go ahead and reset the parameters of oscillator 2. Hold the oscillator button, press clear. So now this is back at its default setting. Let me turn this up. And now as I adjust oscillator 1, we get a similar effect. Now we can actually use both oscillators to modulate the amplitude of each other, which will give us some even more unique results. Now I don't have to have oscillator 1 turned all the way down in this scenario. I could turn this up, and then I could blend these together. Let's go back to our Oscillator 2 subpage, and I see AM1 is off. Let's go ahead and turn that on. And now both oscillators will have their amplitude modulated by the other oscillator. So anyway, just some very interesting sound possibilities there.